They called me servant in the house I built with my own 2 hands. My daughter watched, a cold smile on her face. They thought the old man was broken. They were about to learn that the foundations I lay don't crack easily. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not just talking to the silence. The silence. That's where it started. The dirt on Martha's grave was too fresh. It looked wrong. A raw, ugly scar in the perfect green grass of the cemetery. The air was thick, humid. It smelled like lilies. Too sweet. It made me sick. I stood there long after the service ended. Everyone else trickled away, back to their lives. My hands were clenched tight. 40 years of carpentry will do that to you. Rough hands. Strong hands. But they couldn't hold on to her. Martha was my everything. My blueprint. The level that kept my life straight. 50 years. We built a home. A business. A life. Now, just quiet. A quiet so loud it hurt my ears. I finally turned away. The ache in my chest felt like a 2-ton weight. I looked around for my daughter, Chloe. She was all I had left, the one Martha and I poured everything into. I saw her near the cemetery gates, under an old oak tree. But she wasn't mourning. She wasn't looking back at the grave. She was talking to her husband, Mark. And the conversation looked like a business meeting. Mark, he wore suits that cost more than my truck payment. His shoes were always shiny, never a speck of dust. He worked in finance. He used that word like a weapon. He always looked past you, calculating your worth. I started walking toward them. The gravel crunched under my shoes. They didn't stop talking. They were too focused, too hungry. Streamline the assets immediately, Chloe, Mark was saying. He chopped the air with his hand. The construction business is outdated. The overhead is killing the margins. He checked his watch. My wife's funeral was just another appointment he was running late for. He's going to be difficult, Mark, Chloe replied. Her voice was tight, cold. It wasn't the voice I remembered. It was a voice I hadn't heard before Martha got sick, before Mark really got his hooks into her. Stubborn, yes, but he's 72 and just buried his wife, Mark said. He sounded dismissive, like I was already gone. He's grieving. He's vulnerable. He's not thinking clearly. Then he delivered the line that stopped me cold. We need to step in and take control, now, before he does something foolish. I stopped a few feet away. They finally noticed me. Chloe's eyes widened. Just for a second. Guilt, maybe? Then it was gone, replaced by a look of practiced, hollow sympathy. Mark just smiled, a slick, empty expression that never reached his eyes. It was the smile of a shark. Dad, Chloe started. She stepped forward, placed a tentative hand on my arm. It felt cold. We were just discussing how to help you through this transition. Help me? My voice was rough, gravelly, full of tears I hadn't shed yet. The best help you could give me right now is silence, respect. Mark stepped forward. He extended his hand. I ignored it. His hand just hung there in the humid air. Thomas, we know this is hard, he said. His tone was dripping with condescension, like he was talking to a child. But we can't let the practicalities slide. Practicalities. My wife was in the ground, and he was talking about practicalities. The company, the house, the investments. Mark listed them off. Martha handled all the administration. Without her, things could fall apart very quickly. We need to ensure stability. I looked at my daughter. I searched for the little girl who used to wear my hard hat. The girl who pretended to supervise my work sites. She wasn't there. Stability? I asked, the word tasting like ash. Your mother was buried less than an hour ago. And you're talking about streamlining assets? Dad, don't be emotional, Chloe said sharply. The mask slipped. I saw the coldness underneath. This isn't the time for sentimentality. Mark is right. Sentimentality. 50 years of marriage reduced to sentimentality. You're tired, she continued. You need to rest. It's time to let us take over the reins. The audacity stole my breath. The ground beneath my feet, the very ground where my wife now rested, felt unsteady. They weren't mourning. They were calculating. The betrayal wasn't coming. It was already here, dressed in a fine Italian suit and smelling of expensive cologne. The wake was held at my house. The house I built for Martha. It was crowded, full of people, offering condolences, eating the food Martha's friends had prepared. I sat in my armchair in the corner, watching, observing. Chloe and Mark worked the room, like politicians at a fundraiser, shaking hands, whispering in ears. They were already taking charge, already positioning themselves as the new heads of the family. Mark approached me, holding a glass of whiskey. I hadn't touched a drop. "Thomas, a word," he said, his voice low. "Confidential. I don't want to talk business, Mark," I said, weary. "This isn't business. It's family," he said, sitting on the ottoman in front of me. "We need to make some decisions. About the company. The employees are nervous. They need reassurance." "I'll reassure them tomorrow," I said. "Today is for Martha. Today is for Martha. Today is the perfect time," Mark insisted. His eyes were intense, to show strength. "Continuity. We need to announce the transition. Let everyone know that the company is in good hands."
My hands.
"Not his. There is no transition, Mark," I said, my voice firm. "It's my company. My name on the sign." Mark smiled. That shark smile again. "Of course, Thomas, but you need help. Guidance. Modern expertise." He leaned closer. "Let us help you, before it's too late." He stood up and walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air. A few days later, they came back, with documents. Stacks of them. Power of attorney forms, deeds, business and corporation papers. They spread them across the dining table. The oak table I had built myself. "Dad, this is just a formality," Chloe said, her voice soothing. Too soothing. "It just allows us to help you with the paperwork, pay the bills, manage the accounts." "I can manage my own accounts," I said, looking at the stack of papers. It felt like a trap. "Of course you can," Mark chimed in. "But why should you? You should be grieving, resting, not worrying about payroll and taxes." He clicked his expensive pen. "Just sign here, Thomas, and we'll take care of everything." I looked at the power of attorney form. The words swam before my eyes. It wasn't just financial. It was medical, too. They wanted control over my life. My choices. "No," I said, pushing the papers back across the table. "I'm not signing anything." Mark's smile vanished. His eyes turned cold. "Thomas, be reasonable. This is for your own good." I said no. Chloe sighed. A long-suffering sound. "Dad, why are you being so difficult? We are trying to help you." "I don't need your help," I said, standing up. "I need you to respect my wishes and my grief." They left. Angry. Frustrated, but I knew they weren't finished. They were just getting started. The next week the gaslighting began. Subtle at first. Then more obvious. I couldn't find my glasses. They were in the refrigerator. I missed a phone call. My phone was silenced. And then, the keys. I was getting ready to go to the construction site. I reached for my keys on the hook by the door. They weren't there. I searched the house. Frantic, panicked. I was running late. Chloe was there, watching me, her expression filled with false concern. "Dad, what's wrong?"
She asked.
Her voice soft. "I can't find my keys," I said. Frustrated. "Oh, Dad," she sighed. "You're getting so forgetful. Maybe you shouldn't be driving." I found the keys later, in her purse. She claimed she picked them up by mistake. But I knew the truth. I remembered her picking them up from the hook, dropping them into her purse. It wasn't an accident. It was calculation. They were trying to make me doubt myself, my own mind. They were building a case against me. One rainy Tuesday, Mark arrived alone. That was unusual. He usually brought Chloe as a buffer. He spread a new set of papers across the dining table. This time, it wasn't a request. It was a demand. "Thomas, it's time to face reality," he said, his voice smooth. Persuasive. The business needs restructuring, modern management, optimization, optimize, another word he loved. It meant firing people, cutting corners. "And the house?" I asked, looking around the room. Martha's presence was everywhere. Her favorite chair, her collection of ceramic birds. "We'll sell it," Mark said casually. "It's far too big and old-fashioned for you now." "Old-fashioned? Like me? And where will I live?" "We found the perfect place for you," he said, smiling that shark smile again. "That lovely assisted living community downtown. The one with the golf simulator. Assisted living. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Assisted living? I stared at him. I'm 72, Mark. Not 90. And I'm not infirm. I leaned forward, my voice rising. I ran 3 construction sites last week. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my business. Just then, Chloe walked in. She must have arrived separately. Capable is a relative term, Dad, she chimed in from the doorway. Her voice was laced with false concern. You're grieving. You're distracted. You're forgetting things. She brought up the keys again, the glasses, the missed phone calls. Mark leaned closer, his eyes cold. This is exactly why we need to step in, Thomas. You are becoming erratic. We are trying to protect your legacy before you tarnish it. My legacy is my work in this house, I said, my voice rising, echoing in the quiet room. It's the reputation I built in this town. I stood up too. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. Not in my own house. And I'm not handing it over, I said, pointing to the door. Not now. Not ever. Get out of my house. Chloe looked shocked. Dad, you're being unreasonable, I said. Get out. Mark gathered his papers slowly. Meticulously, his eyes narrowed. The friendly mask was gone. Fine, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We tried to do this the easy way, Thomas. He paused at the door, looking back at me. But if you insist on being stubborn, we will do what is necessary, for your own good and for the good of the family assets. It sounded like a threat, a chilling promise. I thought it was empty. I severely underestimated how deep their greed ran. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Late afternoon. I opened the door to find a sheriff's deputy standing on my porch. He was young, uncomfortable. He held a thick envelope. He looked at me with genuine pity. Mr. Miller? He asked. Yes, said my heart pounding. He handed me the envelope. You've been served, sir. I took the envelope. My hands trembled. I opened it. It was a court summons. Chloe and Mark were suing me for immediate conservatorship. I sat down at the dining table. I read the petition. It was a masterpiece of lies. It claimed I was mentally incompetent, suffering from early-stage dementia, exacerbated by grief, unable to manage my financial affairs. They were requesting full control over every aspect of my life. I read the accusations. They described me as frail, confused, a danger to myself. They cited the misplaced keys, the glasses in the refrigerator, the moments I had stared into space, lost in memories of Martha. They had weaponized my grief, turned my heartbreak into evidence of insanity. Insanity. It was an assassination of my character, and my own daughter had signed her name to it. I needed a lawyer. I called a man named David Horwitz. He specialized in elder law. He had a kind face and a tired smile. He came highly recommended. We met in his office the next day. It was small and cluttered, filled with files and books. It felt safe. David reviewed the case file. His face grew grim. They've been building this case for a while, Thomas, he said, his voice quiet. They've been documenting every little thing. It's all lies, I argued. I know, David said, but they've twisted it, made it look convincing. He paused, looking uncomfortable. They've even got statements from a couple of your suppliers, saying you seem distracted and confused lately. I buried my wife. I slammed my fist on the desk. Of course I was distracted. I was heartbroken. I know, Thomas, David said gently, but the real problem isn't the evidence, flimsy as it is. He paused again, choosing his words carefully. It's the judge. What about the judge? I asked, a cold dread creeping into my bones. Your case has been assigned to the Honorable Richard Harrison. I knew the name, Judge Harrison, was powerful. Respected. That's good, right? I asked, desperate for some good news. David shook his head slowly. Judge Harrison is very conservative. He tends to favor the younger generation, the protectors of the assets. But that wasn't the worst part. Thomas, he's close friends with Mark, David continued. They belong to the same exclusive country club. They play golf every weekend. Their families vacation together. The air in the room suddenly felt thin and cold. It was a setup, a complete, total setup. They weren't just trying to take my things. They were trying to erase me, to silence me, to lock me away. The game was rigged from the start, and I was playing with a losing hand. The first hearing was a calculated exercise in humiliation. The courtroom was large and imposing. Dark wood paneling, heavy atmosphere, judgmental. I felt small and insignificant. My worn suit felt cheap and ill-fitting. Chloe and Mark sat opposite me, the picture of concerned, loving family members. Chloe dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I never saw a tear fall. Mark sat tall and confident, whispering constantly to their lawyer, a sharp-faced, impeccably dressed man named Mr. Davis. He looked expensive, ruthless, and presiding over it all was Judge Richard Harrison, silver hair, imposing presence, impatient expression. He greeted Mark with a familiar nod when he entered the courtroom, a silent acknowledgement of their shared world. But when his eyes fell on me, they were dismissive. Cold, the verdict was already decided. Mr. Davis laid out their case with ruthless efficiency. He painted a picture of a man crumbling under the weight of grief and age. He brought up the misplaced keys, the repeated stories, the suppliers who testified I was distracted. Mr. Miller is a proud man, Mr. Davis said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But pride cannot mask the decline we are witnessing. He is making rash decisions, putting his business and his employees at risk. My clients are simply trying to protect him from himself, Davis concluded. Protect me. The words echoed in the courtroom. They were trying to protect their greed. When David stood up to counter the accusations, the judge was openly hostile. He interrupted him constantly, questioned his edited. Your Honor, David argued, his voice steady. My client is still running a successful construction company. Here are the financials for the last quarter. Healthy profit. He placed a stack of papers on the table. Here are the contracts for 3 new projects, totaling over $500,000. I felt a surge of hope. The facts were on my side. The numbers didn't lie. But Mr. Davis stood up smoothly, radiating confidence. Your Honor, these contracts are precisely the problem, he said, his voice smooth as silk. A man in Mr. Miller's condition should not be undertaking such high-risk projects. He painted a terrifying picture. Heavy machinery, large crews, intricate building codes. It is reckless endangerment. What if his confusion causes a catastrophic accident? The liability is immense. Judge Harrison nodded thoughtfully. He was buying it. A valid concern. Davis, the judge said. He looked down at me, his eyes sharp, judgmental. Mr. Miller, do you truly believe you are capable of managing these risks at your age? Yes, Your Honor, I said, leaning forward, gripping the edge of the table. I've been doing this for 40 years. My safety record is spotless. 40 years ago you were a younger man, the judge said dismissively, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. Time catches up with us all, Mr. Miller. He leaned back. It seems your family is simply trying to offer you a graceful exit, a well-deserved retirement. Retirement. It sounded like a death sentence. The hearing ended with the judge ordering a full psychological evaluation for me, conducted by a doctor of his choosing, and he granted a temporary injunction against my business activities. I was forbidden from signing contracts, accessing company accounts, or even setting foot on my own construction sites. In one swift move, they had crippled my ability to fight back. They had taken away the very thing that defined me. My work, the psychological evaluation, was next. A cold, clinical office. The doctor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, was chosen by Judge Harrison. I later learned she was also a member of the same country club. She was in her late 50s. Sharp features, cold eyes. She asked questions designed to trap me. Mr. Miller, what day is it today? She asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Tuesday, I answered. And the date? November 18th. Note, based on the context that the story takes place over several weeks, months, the date is adjusted from the current date provided in the prompt. She scribbled furiously. Do you often forget names? Sometimes. Doesn't everyone? And you recently lost your wife? She asked, her voice softening slightly. But the sympathy felt fake. That must be very disorienting. It's heartbreaking, I corrected. Heartbreaking, yes. But also confusing, isn't it? She pressed. Hard to keep track of things. Like keys, glasses. She twisted my grief into symptoms, my sadness into confusion, my anger into paranoia. By the end of the hour, she had painted a picture of a man lost in the fog of dementia. Her report would seal my fate. I knew it before she even wrote it. The next blow came the following morning. I went to the bank to withdraw cash for payroll. My employees, men who had worked for me for decades, loyal men with families to feed. They needed to be paid. The teller was a young woman named Emily. I had known her since she was a child. Her father used to work for me. She looked uncomfortable when I handed her the withdrawal slip. Her eyes filled with concern. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller," she whispered, leaning forward. "I can't process this." "What do you mean? Why not?" I asked, confused. "Your accounts. They've been frozen, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a court order." "Frozen," I repeated, the word echoing in my mind. "Who authorized this?" "Your daughter and son-in-law," Emily said, looking down at the counter. "They have temporary control of the funds now." I stood there, speechless, the withdrawal slip trembling in my hand. They had cut me off completely. I had no access to my own money, the money I had earned with my own sweat and labor. I walked out of the bank. The bright sunlight felt harsh, mocking. I sat in my old truck, the reality of my situation crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. I was powerless, helpless. They were systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, brick by brick. When I got back to the main construction site, my foreman, Frank, was waiting for me. Frank was a big man, tough as nails, loyal as a dog. We had built this company together. His face was thunderous. He threw his clipboard onto the hood of my truck. "Thomas, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice rough with anger. "The guys are asking for their paychecks. They're worried, and the lumber supplier just called." Frank continued, pacing back and forth. "Michael Chen," he said, "our line of credit is suspended. They won't deliver the materials for the new build." Michael Chen, a young guy, ambitious. I realized Mark must have gotten to him. "I know, Frank," I said, rubbing my temples. The headache pounded behind my eyes. "I'm working on it. Working on it. Working on it." Or, Frank exploded. "The business is grinding to a halt, Thomas. Chloe and Mark, they froze the accounts," I explained, the words tasting bitter. "The judge granted a temporary injunction." Frank stared at me, incredulous. "They did what? How can they do that?" "It's your company. They're claiming I'm incompetent, Frank," I said, the shame washing over me. "Dementia," Frank cursed loudly. "Incompetent? Dementia? That's insane. You're the sharpest builder in this town." He kicked at the dirt, his face red with rage. "This is that son-in-law of yours, isn't it? That slick suit-wearing snake. I never trusted him." "I don't know what to do, Frank," I admitted, my voice breaking. The admission felt like a betrayal of my own strength. "I can't pay the guys. I can't run the business. My reputation, it's crumbling." Frank looked at the ground, his shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him. "We'll walk, Thomas," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We have to. The guys have mortgages. Kids. We can't work for free." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry," I nodded. Defeated. "I understand, Frank. You do what you have to do." I watched him walk away. My crew, my friends, my family, gone. That night, sitting alone in my empty house, the silence was deafening. The walls seemed to close in on me. I felt a despair so profound, it threatened to swallow me whole. They had won. They had taken everything. My wife, my daughter, my business, my dignity. I was an old man, alone and broken. I was ready to give up. But then a memory sparked in the darkness. Martha, her voice, clear as a bell. We were sitting at the kitchen table, late at night, going over the books. She was organized, precise, a stickler for detail. "The numbers don't lie, Thomas," she had said, tapping her pencil on the ledger. "People do. The numbers." Martha kept meticulous records. She documented everything, and she had an ally, Someone who knew the numbers as well as she did. Someone she trusted implicitly. Sarah. Sarah Jenkins had been our bookkeeper for 30 years. Before retiring a few years back. Sharp as a tack. Fiercely loyal, a photographic memory for financial details. She knew where every dollar was buried, every secret hidden in the ledgers. I called her the next morning, my hand trembling as I dialed the number. Hope, a small, fragile flicker, ignited in my chest. Thomas? Sarah answered, her voice warm and familiar. Is everything all right? I heard about the hearing. I'm so sorry. I need your help, Sarah, I said, the desperation creeping into my voice. They're trying to destroy me. They're claiming I'm incompetent. I know, she said, her voice tight with anger. It's outrageous. I need you to help me go through the business records, I continued. Everything. I need to prove them wrong. Sarah hesitated. Thomas, this is a family feud. A nasty one. I don't want to get caught in the middle. Chloe, I've known her since she was a baby. Chloe is gone, Sarah, I said, my voice hard, the bitterness rising in my throat. This isn't about family anymore. This is about justice. I took a deep breath. They are trying to steal my life. Please, Sarah. Martha would have wanted you to help me. She would have demanded it. The mention of Martha was enough, Sarah sighed, a sound filled with weariness and resolve. All right, Thomas, she said, her voice firm. For Martha. Let's get to work. We spent the next week buried in paperwork, working late into the night in my dusty office at the back of the warehouse. The smell of old paper and sawdust filled the air. We pulled out old files, recent contracts, tax returns, bank statements, everything. We were looking for proof of my competency, but the more we dug, the more something else started to emerge. Something strange, something dark. The numbers didn't add up. Thomas, look at this, Sarah said one afternoon, her finger tracing a line on an invoice. These payments to external consultants. They're huge. Tens of thousands of dollars every month, she continued, her brow furrowed. And they started about a year ago, right around the time Martha got really sick. I frowned, trying to recall the details of the past year. It was a blur of hospital visits and sleepless nights. I don't remember hiring any external consultants, I said, shaking my head. Maybe Mark did? He was helping out with the administration. Mark had been slowly integrating himself into the business, claiming he was using his financial expertise to modernize the company. I had trusted him. I had been distracted by Martha's illness. I had let him handle the financials, believing he was looking out for the family's interests. I had been a fool, a naive, trusting fool. He said these were for marketing and modernization. I said, the realization dawning like a cold, gray sunrise. He said we needed to rebrand. But where did the money go? Sarah asked, looking up from the invoice. There was no marketing campaign, no rebranding. The money had vanished. Into thin air? Sarah started typing furiously on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard, cross-referencing the consultant names with public records, corporate databases. Her face grew pale, her eyes wide with alarm. She stopped typing, stared at the screen. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice trembling. What is it, Sarah? What did you find? I asked, my heart pounding. She turned the laptop towards me. The screen was filled with corporate records. Legal documents. The external consultants were shell corporations, empty companies that existed only on paper, registered to P.O. boxes in Delaware, and the money wasn't going into marketing. It was being funneled into a series of offshore accounts, hidden away in the Cayman Islands. Mark was embezzling from the company. He was stealing from me hundreds of thousands of dollars, right under my nose, while my wife was dying. The depth of his betrayal was staggering. The cold, calculated cruelty of it. But that wasn't the worst part. Sarah kept digging, following the trail of money, untangling the web of deceit, and what she found changed everything. If this story has your heart racing, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Every click helps us keep uncovering stories that deserve to be heard. It helps us fight back against the darkness. The darkness Sarah uncovered was deeper than I could have ever imagined. Mark wasn't just embezzling to fund his lavish lifestyle, the fancy suits, the expensive cars. He was drowning in debt. Massive, crippling debt. He had made a series of disastrous investments, risky real estate ventures, fueled by greed and arrogance. He thought he was smarter than everyone else. He was wrong, and he had borrowed money from some very dangerous people. Loan sharks, people who didn't ask nicely for their money back. And he had used my company, my reputation, my assets, as collateral, fraudulently. He had forged my signature on loan documents, pledging the business as security. If he defaulted, they would come for me. My company, my home, everything. The twist hit me like a lightning bolt, an electric shock that jolted me out of my despair. The conservatorship wasn't about my health. It wasn't about protecting my legacy. It was a desperate cash grab, a hostile takeover. Mark needed control of my assets to cover his own failures, to pay off his debts before they consumed him, before they killed him. And Chloe, my own daughter, blinded by greed. Ambition was helping him do it. She was willing to sacrifice me to save him. "This is it," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and relief. "This is how we fight back. This is how we prove his motive. We had him. We had the evidence. The proof of his crimes. We could take it to the police." But Sarah was still scrolling, her expression growing darker, her face pale and drawn. "Thomas, there's more," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Something worse." "More?" I asked, incredulous. "What could be worse than that?" "One of the real estate ventures, the biggest one," she explained, her voice trembling, "the one that collapsed and triggered the debt crisis. Coastal Holdings LLC. Coastal Holdings. A luxury condo development on the waterfront. It had gone bankrupt spectacularly, leaving investors ruined. Mark poured millions into it," Sarah continued, "but it was built on lies and fraud, and he wasn't alone." Sarah mentioned Michael Chen, the supplier who had cut off my credit. Michael Chen's company was supposed to supply the lumber for Coastal Holdings. Sarah said, "But Mark never paid him." "Michael is facing bankruptcy. That's why he suspended your credit. Mark threatened him, told him to cooperate with the conservatorship, or he'd never see a dime. Michael wasn't a villain. He was another victim." Then Sarah pointed to a list of investors, a list hidden deep in the incorporation documents of one of the shell corporations. A secret list. My blood ran cold. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. There, halfway down the list, bold and undeniable, was the name Richard Harrison, the judge. He hadn't just been biased. He was complicit. He was invested in the same fraudulent scheme as Mark. He wasn't just a friend helping a friend. He was a co-conspirator, a partner in crime. He needed the conservatorship to go through just as badly as Mark did, to protect his own investment, his own reputation, his own skin. If Mark went down, he would take the judge down with him. The realization was staggering. The corruption ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. It reached the highest levels of power in this town. I wasn't just fighting a rigged game, I was fighting a criminal conspiracy. And the referee was the star player on the other team. The odds were impossible. The stakes were life and death. If I exposed them, they would destroy me. They had the power, the influence, but I had the truth. And the truth, as Martha always said, was a powerful weapon. I looked at Sarah. Her face was etched with fear, but also determination. "What do we do, Tom?" she asked. "We fight," I said, my voice regaining its strength, the fear replaced by a cold, calculated rage. "We burn it all down." We spent the next few days preparing for the final hearing. David, my lawyer, was energized by the revelation. He saw the chance to not only save me, but to expose the corruption that had infected the justice system. We compiled the evidence, the bank statements, the invoices, shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the investor list. It was a mountain of proof, undeniable, irrefutable, but we knew it wouldn't be enough. Not in Judge Harrison's courtroom. He would dismiss the evidence, suppress it, twist it. We needed a different strategy, a nuclear option. We decided to expose them publicly, in open court, in front of the media. The spectators. The world. It was a risky move. A dangerous gamble. If it failed, I would lose everything. I would be locked away. Silenced forever. But it was the only move I had left. The day of the final hearing arrived. The sky outside was gray and overcast, mirroring the storm brewing in my soul. I walked into the courtroom feeling an eerie sense of calm. The calm before the storm. I looked old and tired. Defeated, I played the part they had written for me. The frail, confused old man. Chloe and Mark were already seated at the plaintiff's table, looking confident and triumphant. Mark was smiling, whispering something to Mr. Davis, who chuckled appreciatively. Chloe was staring straight ahead, her face a mask of practiced concern. But I saw the flicker of anticipation in her eyes. The hunger for the prize. Judge Harrison entered the courtroom, his black robe swirling around him like a shroud. He radiated authority, power. He barely glanced at me as he took his seat on the bench, his throne. The hearing proceeded exactly as expected. Mr. Davis delivered a passionate, eloquent closing argument, emphasizing my supposed cognitive decline. He presented the results of the psychological evaluation from Dr. Reed. Unsurprisingly, it found me to be in the early stages of dementia, incompetent. Your Honor, Davis concluded, his voice ringing with conviction, my clients have acted out of love and concern. They have endured the pain of watching a beloved father deteriorate. He paused, looking at Chloe, who dutifully dabbed at her eyes. And they are prepared to take on the burden of managing Mr. Miller's affairs. Davis continued, ensuring his comfort and protecting his legacy. We urge you to grant the conservatorship without delay. As a final cruel flourish, they called Chloe to the stand one last time. She walked to the witness box, her steps measured, her demeanor composed. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Davis said gently, can you tell the court about the incident last week? Chloe nodded, her voice choked with fabricated emotion. She told a story about how I had allegedly gotten lost driving home from the grocery store. A complete and utter lie. I had taken a detour to avoid traffic. They had twisted it into evidence of confusion. He called me, terrified, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He didn't know where he was. He was disoriented, rambling. She looked up at the judge, her eyes pleading. I'm so scared for him, Your Honor. I'm scared he's going to hurt himself. I felt the sting of her betrayal, the depth of her deceit. My own daughter, lying under oath to steal my life. But I remained silent, my eyes fixed on the table in front of me, my expression blank. I let her hang herself with her own words. Judge Harrison looked down at me, his expression a mixture of pity and contempt. The look of a man who holds absolute power and enjoys wielding it. Mr. Miller, he said, his voice booming through the courtroom, dripping with condescension. I have reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the psychological evaluation, and I must say, I find the situation deeply troubling, tragic, even. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the words hang in the air. It is clear that you are no longer capable of managing your affairs, he continued. Your cognitive decline is evident, and your refusal to accept help is alarming. He leaned forward, his eyes locking on mine. It is the judgment of this court that the petition for conservatorship is granted. Your daughter and son-in-law will assume full control of your assets and affairs, effective immediately. Chloe let out a relieved sigh, a small sound that echoed in the quiet courtroom. Mark smiled, a shark scenting blood in the water. He reached over and squeezed Chloe's hand. They had won. They thought it was over. Judge Harrison continued, unable to resist a final twist of the knife, a final assertion of his dominance. Miss Miller, I understand this is difficult, he said, his voice softening slightly, but the mockery still evident. Losing one's independence is never easy, but you must realize that your family is acting in your best interests. He paused, a small smile playing on his lips. Your resistance to their help, your stubborn refusal to accept reality, is frankly naive. 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 The word hit me like a slap in the face. The arrogance, the disdain, the utter contempt. He banged his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The case was closed. I had lost. But I hadn't moved. The courtroom fell silent, anticipating my departure, the shuffling of feet as the spectators prepared to leave. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. "Your Honor," I said, my voice quiet but clear, cutting through the silence. "May I say a few words?" Judge Harrison sighed impatiently, annoyance flickering across his face. "The case is closed, Mr. Miller. The ruling has been delivered. There is nothing more to say." "I believe there is, Your Honor," I insisted, stepping forward, away from the defense table, into the center of the courtroom. "It concerns a matter of financial mismanagement, a significant one." Mark's smile faltered. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He looked at Davis, who shook his head slightly. Chloe looked confused. She didn't understand what was happening. "Miss Miller, this is highly irregular," the judge snapped, his voice sharp. "I will not allow you to waste the court's time with rambling accusations from a confused mind." He pointed his gavel at me. "Sit down, or I will have the bailiff remove you." "I'm not rambling, Your Honor," I said, my eyes locked on his, holding his gaze. I saw the flicker of fear behind the arrogance. "I'm talking about embezzlement. I'm talking about fraud." The courtroom stirred. Whispers echoed through the gallery. Then I dropped the bomb. "And I'm talking about Coastal Holdings, LLC." The effect was instantaneous. The judge froze. A flicker of recognition, then panic, crossed his face. The blood seemed to drain from his cheeks. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "And specifically," I continued, my voice gaining strength, resonating in the silent courtroom, "I'm talking about account 4792, the offshore account in the Cayman Islands, where the embezzled funds from my company were deposited." Mark went white. His face turned a sickly gray. His eyes darted towards the exit, like a trapped animal seeking escape. But I wasn't looking at Mark. I was looking at the judge. "You see, Your Honor," I said slowly, enunciating every word, letting the implications sink in. "I may be naive, as you say. I may be old, but I am not stupid." I paused, letting the silence build, "and neither is my bookkeeper." We followed the money, all of it. Judge Harrison's face was now a mask of terror. His hands gripped the edge of the bench, his knuckles white. He seemed unable to breathe. "We know about the fraudulent loans," I continued, my voice echoing in the profound silence. "We know about the shell corporations. We know about the kickbacks." I took a step closer to the bench. "And we know about the investors in Coastal Holdings." All of them. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The judge's secret, his complicity in Mark's fraud, his corruption, was exposed. The courtroom was utterly silent. No one breathed. No one moved. The air crackled with the unspoken truth, the sudden, shocking reversal of power. Judge Harrison stared at me, his eyes wide with the realization of his ruin. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was paralyzed, trapped in the web of his own corruption, exposed for the world to see. Mark, realizing the game was up, suddenly stood up, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. "This is slander," he shouted, his voice trembling, desperate. "He's lying. He's a confused old man making up stories." But no one was listening to him. All eyes were on the judge. Judge Harrison, regaining a fraction of his composure, banged his gavel weakly. "Order! Order in the court." But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth was out. My lawyer, David, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing comprehension and astonishment, suddenly stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice sharp and clear, energized by the revelation. "In light of this new evidence, this staggering revelation of corruption and conflict of interest, we move to dismiss the conservatorship petition immediately." He paused, looking directly at the judge, "and we request that this matter be referred to the district attorney's office for a full investigation into the activities of Mr. Mark Miller, and indeed, this very court." The judge stared at him, speechless. He looked at Mark, a look of pure hatred, then back at me. His world was crumbling around him, his legacy destroyed, his future annihilated. He nodded weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "Motion granted." The conservatorship is dismissed. He stood up abruptly, stumbling over his robes, and fled the courtroom, leaving a trail of silence and shock in his wake. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The news of the courtroom revelation spread like wildfire, a scandal that rocked the town to its foundations. The district attorney launched an immediate investigation into Mark's financial dealings and Judge Harrison's involvement. 2 weeks later, Mark was arrested at his office. Pert walked in front of the cameras, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face haggard. He was charged with embezzlement, fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The evidence Sarah and I had uncovered was overwhelming, undeniable. He was facing decades in prison. His life was over. Judge Harrison, facing impeachment, criminal charges, and public disgrace, resigned from the bench. His career, his reputation, his power, all evaporated overnight. He became a pariah, a symbol of corruption and greed. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the psychologist, found her license under review for professional misconduct. Her biased evaluation was exposed. Michael Chen, the supplier, came forward and testified against Mark. He detailed the threats and the fraud surrounding Coastal Holdings. His cooperation helped him save his own business. And Chloe, my daughter, she was left with nothing. Mark's debts consumed everything they owned. The big house, the fancy cars, the expensive lifestyle, the country club membership, all gone, liquidated to pay off creditors and legal fees. She was implicated in the conspiracy. She managed to avoid criminal charges by claiming ignorance of Mark's illegal activities. She said she was a victim, too, a fool blinded by love, but her reputation was destroyed. The town turned against her. She came to me one last time. A few months later, I was sitting on the porch of the house I built. The house she had tried to steal. The sun was setting. The air was cool, the scent of sawdust. Comforting, familiar. She stood on the sidewalk, hesitant, looking small and broken, the arrogance gone, replaced by despair. "Dad, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. "I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. Mark lied to me," she continued, her voice cracking. "He used me. I didn't understand what he was doing. Please, help me." I looked at her, the little girl I had loved so fiercely, the daughter I had sacrificed everything for, and I felt nothing but a profound, aching sadness. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. "You made your choice, Chloe," I said quietly, my voice devoid of anger, only weariness. "You chose greed over family. You chose lies over truth. You chose him over me." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And now you have to live with the consequences." I turned and walked back into the house, closing the door softly behind me. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like a final goodbye. I rebuilt my business. Frank and the crew came back the very next day, their loyalties stronger than ever. We finished the projects, secured new contracts. The company thrived, built on the foundation of integrity and hard work, the foundations I had laid 40 years ago. But the victory was bittersweet. I had saved my legacy, but I had lost my daughter. The silence in the house was different now, heavier, filled with the ghosts of what could have been, the echoes of laughter and love that had been poisoned by greed. One evening, months later, I sat on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I held a picture of Martha in my hands, her smiling face, her kind eyes, the wisdom lines around her mouth. "We did it, Martha," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "We protected what we built. We stood our ground." A single tear rolled down my cheek, tracing a path through the dust on my skin. I had won the war, but the cost was immeasurable. I was alone, surrounded by the echoes of a family that had destroyed itself from within. But I was still standing. The house I built was still strong, its foundation solid, its structure sound, and the legacy I fought for, the legacy of honesty, integrity, and justice, remained intact. And in the silence of the twilight, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, was enough. Thanks for listening. Please rate this story in the comment. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot because your time matters.